This is Chapter 5, Early Childhood, Body and Mind. We'll first look at some body changes that occur during this stage. Children become slimmer as the lower body lengthens. Each year from age 2 through 6, well-nourished children add almost 3 inches in height and gain about 4.5 pounds in weight. And the center of gravity moves from the breastbone down to the belly button. Children need far fewer calories per pound of body weight than infants do, and obesity is a more frequent problem than malnutrition. Children in low-income families are especially vulnerable to obesity because their cultures still guard against undernutrition, and their parents may rely on fast foods. Overfeeding is causing an epidemic of illnesses associated with obesity, such as heart disease and diabetes. Many children want foods that are high in fat, salt, and sugar. In poor nations, lack of micronutrients is severe, and vitamin pills and added supplements don't always help. In developed nations, fresh food is the best source of nutrition, and children who eat more vegetables and fewer fried foods usually gain bone mass, but not fat. Between 3 and 8% of all young children have a food allergy, usually to a healthy common food. Cow's milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, soy, wheat, and shellfish are frequent culprits. Diagnostic standards and treatments vary. Some children insist on eating only certain foods prepared and presented in a particular way. This rigidity, known as the just right phenomenon, would be pathological in adults, but is normal in children under age 6. When 1,500 parents were surveyed about their 1 to 6-year-olds, their responses indicated that over 75% of the 33-year-olds evidenced some just right tendency. And this chart shows the average scores of children who are rated by their parents on a survey indicating the child's desire to have certain things, including food selection and preparation, done just right. Such strong preferences for rigid routines tend to fade by age 6. Too much sugar and too little fiber cause tooth decay, which affects more than 1/3 of all young U.S. children. Severe early decay harms the formation of permanent teeth and the jaw and may affect speech. Parent-childhood experiences and habits, income, and access create barriers to good dental care for many low-income children. Children develop all their motor skills spontaneously and diligently as they play. By age 6, most North Americans ride tricycles, climb ladders, pump their legs on swings, and throw, catch, and kick balls. Muscle growth, brain maturation, and guided practice advance every gross motor skill. Practice improves dexterity and advances fine motor skills, which involve small body movements. Pollutants harm young, growing brains and bodies more than older, developed ones. Results from a Canadian study suggest that some suspected pollutants, such as car and truck exhaust, were proven to be harmful to children. Much more research on pollutants in food and water is needed. Accidents are the leading cause of death worldwide for people under age 40. 2 to 6-year-olds have a greater risk than slightly older children. And injury control and harm reduction refers to practices that are successfully aimed at anticipating, controlling, and preventing dangerous activities. Primary prevention includes actions that change overall background conditions to prevent some unwanted event or circumstance, such as injury, disease, or abuse. Secondary prevention includes actions that avert harm in a high-risk situation, such as stopping a car before it hits a pedestrian or installing traffic lights at dangerous intersections. Tertiary prevention includes actions such as immediate and effective medical treatment that are taken after an adverse event occurs and that are aimed at reducing the harm or preventing disability. And this is an overview between 1972 to 2008 of deaths by poisoning. We'll look now at brain development. By age 2, a child's brain weighs 75% of what it will in adulthood. Extensive sprouting and then pruning of dendrites has already taken place. The brain reaches 90% of adult weight by age 6. And this is a review. So the cortex is continuing to mature. The prefrontal cortex is very limited in infancy and continues to develop at least until early adulthood. Between ages 2 and 6, neurological increases are especially notable in the areas of the cortex, where planning, thinking, social awareness, and language occur. Neurological immaturity is another reason adults need to prevent childhood injury. Maturation of the prefrontal cortex gradually enables children to focus attention and curb impulsiveness. Before such maturation, many young children jump from task to task. They cannot stay quiet. Others act in the opposite way. In a phenomenon called perseveration, some children persevere in or stick to one thought or action, unable to quit. From ages 2 to 6, maturation of the prefrontal cortex has several notable benefits. Sleep becomes more regular, emotions become more nuanced and responsive, and temper tantrums decrease or subside. The primary reason for faster thinking is new and extensive myelination. Myelin is a fatty coating on the axons that speeds signals between neurons. A gradual increase in myelination makes 5-year-olds much quicker than 3-year-olds, who are quicker than toddlers. The corpus callosum is the part of the brain that grows and myelinates rapidly during early childhood. It consists of a band of nerve fibers that connects the left and right sides of the brain, and it facilitates communication between the two brain hemispheres. We'll look now at emotions in the brain. The limbic system includes parts of the brain that are crucial in the expression and regulation of emotions. The amygdala is a tiny brain structure that registers emotions, particularly fear and anxiety. The hippocampus is a brain structure that is a central processor of memory, especially memory for locations. The hypothalamus is a brain area that responds to the amygdala and the hippocampus to produce hormones that activate other parts of the brain and body. And prolonged stress may lead to emotional and cognitive impairment. We'll look now at thinking during early childhood, focusing on Piaget's pre-operational thought. Pre-operational means before, logical operations, reasoning processes. The child's verbal ability permits symbolic thinking. Language frees the child from the limits of sensory motor experience. Some obstacles to logic are centration, egocentrism, and focus on appearance. Centration is when characteristics of a pre-operational thought whereby a young child focuses or centers on one idea, excluding all others. Egocentrism is when young children's tendency to think about the world entirely from their own personal perspective is the focus of their thinking style. Focus on appearance refers to the characteristic of pre-operational thought whereby a young child ignores all attributes that are not apparent. All right, here is a video demonstrating egocentrism.
Can you tell me what you see when you look at that from where you're sitting? What are some of the things that you see?
And a cat.
A cat.
And a tree and a bone.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool?
An owl.
An owl.
And him.
What is that?
A goat.
A goat.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you see?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And that's another little tree.
Another little tree? Right. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that. And that.
Okay, so can you tell me what you see from that side?
A fox and a bone and a volcano and a rock and a big fat Christmas tree.
Now, Braxton, can you tell me what I see from where I'm sitting?
A bird and a river and a volcano and a horsey and a rock and a tree.
All right, so the idea here is that the first child that you saw was younger and still in egocentric thinking. So when we're talking about egocentric thinking, we don't mean that the children are selfish. We mean that cognitively, they believe that what they see, what they experience, what they feel is the same as what everyone else sees, experiences, and feels. Another way that you might have personally experienced this is if you talk on the phone to a small child. They frequently will ask questions about things that are happening in their environment, not understanding that you can't see what they are seeing in that moment. It's also sometimes why children stand directly in front of the TV and don't realize that you can't see through them. That, and sometimes they might need their eyes checked. So this is an example again of egocentric thinking. Static reasoning refers to the characteristic of pre-operational thought whereby a young child thinks that nothing changes. Whatever is now has always been and always will be. Irreversibility is the characteristic of pre-operational thought whereby a young child thinks that nothing can be undone. A thing cannot be restored to the way it was before a change occurred. We'll look now at conservation and logic. Conservation is the principle that the amount of a substance remains the same when its appearance changes. In a demonstration here, Sadie, at age 5, demonstrates Piaget's conservation of liquids experiment. All right, we'll take a look now at a few of the classic conservation tasks.
So I'm going to make 2 rows of quarters. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or are they the same?
The same.
The same? Okay, now watch. Now, does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or are they the same?
That one has more quarters.
That one has more quarters?
Yeah.
Why does that one have more quarters?
Because it's stretched out.
Because it's stretched out?
Yes.
Okay, so how many are in this row?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, how many are in this row?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So, are there more in this row, or are they the same?
The same.
The same?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we have 2 sticks. Is this stick longer? Is this stick longer, or are they the same?
The same.
The same? What about now? Is this stick longer? Is this stick longer, or are they the same?
That stick is longer.
This stick is longer?
Yeah.
Can you tell me why?
Because you moved it over.
So now it's longer.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me. I'm gonna pour blue water into each of these cups, and you're gonna have to tell me when they have the same amount, okay? Okay, tell me when this one is the same.
The same.
The same? Those 2 are the same now?
Yeah.
Okay.
The way that's the same. Huh?
Good. Okay, now watch this. We're going to take the blue water from this glass. We're going to pour it into this glass. Now, does this glass have more water? Does this glass have more water, or are they the same?
Having more water.
This one has more water? Can you tell me why?
Because that one's higher than that one.
That one's higher than that one, right? Can you tell me, does this ball have more Play-Doh? Does this ball have more Play-Doh, or are they the same?
That one has more Play-Doh.
That one has more?
Yeah.
Let's try and make them the same. Make them 2 of the same size. What about now?
They're the same.
They're the same now?
Yeah.
Okay, now watch. Now, does this one have more Play-Doh? Does this one have more Play-Doh, or are they the same?
That one has more Play-Doh.
That one has more Play-Doh? Can you tell me why?
You smushed that one.
Because that one's smushed. How about now? Does this one have more Play-Doh? Does this one have more Play-Doh, or are they the same?
The same.
Now they're the same. Why are they the same?
You roll that one back up.
Okay, great. Okay, did we show the graham crackers fair? Is this fair?
Yes.
Yes? Can you tell me why it's fair?
Yeah, what did I do?
I have 1.
You have 2 and I have 1.
Is that fair?
No.
No? How about now?
Now that's fair.
Now that's fair. Why is that fair?
You have to, and I have to.
Yeah.
Vygotsky's theory of social learning is also reviewed during this stage. Every aspect of children's cognitive development is embedded in the social context, and Vygotsky's term for a person whose cognition is stimulated and directed by older and more skilled members of society is apprentice in thinking. The zone of proximal development is Vygotsky's term for the skills that a person can exercise only with assistance, not yet independently. And scaffolding is temporary support that is tailored to a learner's needs and abilities and aimed at helping the learner master the next task in a given learning process. Over-imitation is the tendency of children to copy an action that is not a relevant part of the behavior to be learned. Common among 2 to 6-year-olds when they imitate adult actions that are irrelevant and inefficient. Over-imitation is usually quite amusing to adults. Right, here's an example of over-imitation. Again, note closely what the adult does to complete the task, what is necessary, what is not necessary, and then note what the child does to complete the task.
There it is.
I got him.
We'll take a look now at children's theories. Theory. Children attempt to explain everything they see and hear. Children develop theories about intentions before they employ their impressive ability to imitate. Parents found that most of their children's questions were about human behavior, especially the parent's behavior toward the child. Children seek to develop a theory to explain things, so the question, why can't I have some candy, is not satisfactorily answered by it's almost dinner time. Theory of mind. Person's theory of what other people might be thinking is defined as theory of mind. Emergent ability, slow to develop, but typically beginning in most children at about age 4, and this can be seen when young children try to escape punishment by lying. In an interesting study conducted by Evans and fellow researchers, children were placed in a room with a table, chairs, and an overturned cup that had candy filled inside of it. The children were told not to peek under the cup before the adult researcher left the room. The adult researcher then left the room, and naturally the majority of children peeked under that cup. Though you can see from the chart that compliance with that request seemed to be greater for younger children than with older children, okay? And then the researcher came back into the room and asked, well, actually in this experiment they didn't have to ask the children whether or not they peeked because the cup had candy inside of it. So when the child lifted the cup up, the candy spilled onto the table and they were unable to put it back together. So then they had to either tell the truth, admit that they had peeked, or come up with some type of lie. The ability to tell a plausible lie corresponds with cognitive ability and theory of mind. But what's also very interesting is to explore why the children lie and how punishment plays a role in this. Here is another experiment that was conducted that's very similar to the experiment with the cups. In this case, the children asked not to turn around and look at a toy. And so the researcher that is responsible for this experiment also talks about how this correlates with cognitive development. But pay close attention to the end again when they are talking about the influence of punishment. What we would also find value in looking at is why children lie in the first place. So yes, it is an indication of cognitive development for the complexity of the lie. But what we've also found is that the lie itself comes from fear of punishment.
What if you could submit your kids to a lie detector test of sorts, put them in a special room where you could see if they will lie or tell the truth? These kids have all been told not to turn around in their chairs, not to peek at the toy on the table when the grown-up leaves the room, but time after time after time, kids will peek. 80% of them will peek within seconds. And then when the grown-up returns to the room and asks if the child peeked, the kids will lie.
And that was out of the room. Did you turn around and look at the toilet? No. So where did you?
That is a lie.
Did you turn around and peek the toy while I was gone? Oh, okay.
Another lie.
Did you turn around to look at what the toy was? No.
Lie after lie after lie. In fact, 74% of kids between the ages of 4 and 7 who peek will lie about it.
Did you turn around to look at what the toy was? No.
These are absolutely not bad children. These are very typical children. It is a natural, normal development that children will occasionally tell lies.
Lying in kids is normal, natural? Well, yes, lying is a positive developmental milestone, according to Professor Victoria Talwar and her team of research assistants at Montreal's McGill University. They are studying how lying fits into normal brain development.
It's part of normal development. And understanding the difference between what's true and convincing someone else of an altered truth, it actually really takes a lot of intelligence to do that.
Intelligence? Kids who lie are smart? Well, in a way, yes. The phrase kids lying sounds like, it just instinctively sounds like a bad thing. But in your lab, I get the sense that you're kind of neutral about whether it's good or bad for kids to lie.
The fact is, lying is not a good behavior. It's very clear in society we don't like people to lie. On the other hand, lying is a good thing in that it's a byproduct of a positive development in children. So when we see lying in children, it is actually a marker of this ability to understand someone else's perspective and what's going through
Which
other
is a
people's
good
minds.
thing.
Which is a good thing, because it's really important part of our social communication. To be able to communicate effectively with people, to understand what they're thinking, what they know, makes us better communicators, and also
And out of that can grow empathy.
empathy and sympathy.
But it's interesting that you're saying that it seems developmentally that what we think of as good abilities like being able to sympathize and to empathize and to communicate, that the route to that passes through the phase of figuring out how to tell a good lie.
Yes, it's like you, all the skills that you need that are very important for this positive development are also skills that can be used to tell a lie. So what you have is that it really is a marker of this increasing cognitive sophistication in children's development and in their complexity of thought.
Measuring that complexity of thought is tricky. After all, how do you really know if a person is lying? You can't ask them if they're lying because they could lie to you. So Dr. Talwar designed this experiment. So this is the child. The child sits here.
The child sits here.
And do you guys have a tester in that?
Researcher.
Researcher. Okay.
Yep. The researcher sits across here.
And over your
And
shoulder.
over here is the hidden camera.
Okay. So
Which
from
captures
outside.
the child's behavior. It shoots this way,
Right.
capturing over the researcher's shoulder.
So I'm looking at it this angle, I just see a reflection,
That's
but now looking back the other way, this is actually me on the camera that
That's
you
right.
record everything on.
That's right.
The kids play a simple game in order to win a prize. They have to face the wall, and based only on the sounds they hear, they have to guess what the toy on the table is. Sirens, a police car, crying, a baby, and then comes the real test.
And we leave a toy that makes no noise, has no sound that you can press, and we put that on the table, and with it we put a different clue, an audio clue. So this time the audio clue has nothing to do, in this case, with SpongeBob.
So there's no way that sound can lead
That's
you
right.
to SpongeBob.
There's no way you can guess what it is.
So
if you're listening.
if SpongeBob is your answer, it means that you peaked.
It means that you peek.
I have to imagine, now that I'm sitting in this room and this little table, picturing myself 5 years old, and the grown-up leaves the room, and I know there's a prize at stake if I can guess.
Mm-hmm.
The temptation must be enormous.
We create that situation because then they can choose whether they confess up to doing it or whether they conceal and lie about doing it.
It's a fascinating experiment, watching these researchers, who in a way aren't all that honest themselves about what's really going on here.
There's a phone call for you.
They're lying.
Okay, I'll be right back, Cindy.
And watching the parents secretly watch their kids lie. There's a real sense of drama here. Leia, who is 4, and Aleko, 6, were 2 recent subjects. Leia went first, and the interesting thing about watching her dad, John, watch her, he's a police officer, and his specialty is interrogation.
Will it upset you to see her do that, or either of your kids?
No. Well, I don't know. I don't know about my wife. I don't think it'll upset me.
Leia peeks, but when asked if she peeked,
Did you turn around and peek at the toy while I was gone? You did? Okay,
then
what do you
she
think?
tells the truth. That has less to do with the fact that her dad is a cop than it does with the fact that she's a kid. Most young kids don't yet know how to lie well. They have yet to learn how to do it.
So you've got to be fairly sophisticated to be able to lie.
Yes, you have to be able to remember everything you've said before, so you keep consistency in your lie. You can't be caught out.
You have to put yourself also in the other person's shoes. The person who
Yes.
suspects you, you've got to think about what they're thinking and figure out how to dodge that.
Yeah, you have to be able to think, okay, so they think that I did this, therefore they're going to expect my answers to be along these lines. So they have to keep a representation, not only what they really did, but what the other person thinks they did and what that person's expectations would be. And so they have to keep it requires a lot of mental flexibility and also be able to keep sort of this alternate representation of an alternate reality in their mind to keep that story consistent.
Stay tuned around. I'll be right back, okay?
Now look at Aleko, Leia's brother. He is 6. He peeks, and when asked, well, he knows he's on the verge of getting caught and probably figures it's better not to say anything. Not quite a lie, but he's definitely weighing his options. Lie or confess. In the end, choosing to take the 5th.
We have to be careful that we don't that we don't say the child, oh, it's terrible a child lies, and remember that, adults are doing it too. That it's an adult behavior more so than a child behavior. Children are more likely to actually be blunt truth tellers compared to adults. But the other thing is that children often are picking up on the little lies that we're telling.
At some level, do you think we're all learning from our parents?
Yeah, I think for the most part that kids, they have that innocence and they slowly lose it because of us. I mean, everything's a learned behavior, but you try and teach them as best as you can, and
it's just not so clear cut.
no, it's not.
So what does a parent do, especially considering this little note from one of Talwar's research assistants?
When kids realize that they're about to get in trouble and they're going to get punished for whatever it is they have done, they're more likely to lie.
What we try and tell parents is, when you first see your child lying to it, don't. The natural reaction often is to react emotionally, to be upset. Oh my goodness, my child's just lied to me. But to realize that, it's a natural part of the development that they will try and do this, and that really one should talk to them calmly and rationally about the importance of not lying and also modeling that behavior in ourselves, because they learn from our behavior and how we act. And also,
That means we can never lie in front of our children?
well, it means that if you want them to be telling the truth, then it's important that you're not turning around and lying all over the place as well.
And there you have the key piece of advice for all of us grown-ups.
Good job.
For Nightline in Montreal, I'm John Donvan.
All right, so again, for clarity with these studies, it can be a little confusing sometimes the way they present it. They are not attempting to glorify lying, and certainly you're not saying that liars are smarter people. What they are saying, however, is that the cognitive ability to be able to entertain possibilities, come up with a story, understand their own thoughts and other people's thoughts is something that comes with cognitive growth and maturity. So the child's ability to develop theories correlates with the maturity of the prefrontal cortex and with advances in executive processing. Context and experience are relevant, and context and culture matter. We'll revisit the topic of punishment in a later chapter, but again, what I think is personally most interesting about all of this is that they are skipping over the impetus for the lying, which again is the fear of punishment. So if we took that out, we might not see that lying developing as a natural behavior, as they refer to it. So we're moving now to language in early childhood, and this is in your reading as well. a chart exploring the characteristic or achievement in first language based on age. Language is pivotal to every kind of cognition in early childhood, and early childhood is a sensitive period or best time to master vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. The average child knows about 500 words at age 2 and more than 10,000 at age 6. The naming explosion occurs when vocabulary becomes more general. Verbs, adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, and many nouns are mastered. And fast mapping is speedy and sometimes imprecise ways in which children learn new words by tentatively placing them in mental categories according to their perceived meaning. Logical extension is closely related to fast mapping, and it occurs when children use words to describe other objects in the same category. Strategies and experiences include code-focused teaching, book reading, parent education, language enhancement, and preschool programs. So the grammar of a language includes structures, techniques, and rules that communicate meaning, also word order and word repetition, prefixes and suffixes, intonation, and emphasis. Over-regularization refers to application of rules of grammar even when exceptions occur. It makes language seem more regular than it actually is. Looking at learning 2 languages and language minority children. Lower school achievement, diminished self-esteem, and inadequate employment are the outcomes for language minority children. Becoming more fluent in the school language than in their home language is a shift in language for children who are coming from bilingual households but focusing just on one language in the household. Balanced bilingual refers to being fluent in 2 languages, not favoring one over the other, and this has great cognitive and social benefits. It occurs if adults talk frequently, listen carefully, and value both languages. So this is what we've seen from research is most ideal for children who are coming from bilingual or multilingual households. That second or multiple languages can be a huge cognitive boost and certainly an asset in childhood and into adulthood if the bilingual languages or multiple languages are practiced evenly. All right, so quality matters in terms of homes and schools. If the home educational environment is poor, a good preschool program can aid in health, cognition, and social skills. If a family provides extensive learning opportunities and encouragement, the quality of the preschool is less crucial. Child-centered programs stress children's natural inclination to learn through play rather than by following adult directions. They encourage self-paced exploration and artistic expression, and they show the influence of Vygotsky, who thought that children learn through play with other children and through cultural practices that structure life. Montessori schools emphasize individual pride and accomplishment, presenting literacy-related tasks such as outlining letters and looking at books. And the Reggio Emilia approach involves a famous program of early childhood education that originated in the town of Reggio Emilia, Italy. It encourages each child's creativity in a carefully designed setting. Teacher-directed programs stress academic subjects taught by a teacher to an entire class. They help children learn letters, numbers, shapes, and colors, as well as how to listen to the teacher and sit quietly. They make a clear distinction between work and play, and they're much less expensive since the child-adult ratio can be higher. Intervention programs such as Project Head Start are most widespread early childhood education programs in the U.S. Head Start is. It was begun in 1965 and it's funded by the federal government. Initially, the program was thought to be highly successful at raising children's intelligence. 10 years later, early gains were found to fade. So the overall story from the development that we're looking at, particularly cognitively during this stage, is that as children mature cognitively, they are also observing the behaviors of the adults around them, taking in the experiences that they've gained, and they are also taking into consideration the consequences of their actions, which is directly related to their ability to have that theory of mind cognitively. So these are some things to keep in mind as we're thinking about how to best place children in an opportunity to develop well cognitively, physically, and socially and emotionally. If you haven't already, make sure that you read the chapter and complete the learning curves, complete your test, and if you have any questions, please reach out to me.